Everybody, we are going to be going through the first few paragraphs of the Fall of the House of Usher. I'm not sure exactly how long we'll be spending in this story today, but I'm going to try to get through the first four paragraphs in a reasonable amount of time and talk to you guys about the setting and its influence on our main character, who is the narrator. So we're going to head to our site in Pearson. And just to let you know how we get there, we'll go to our Mariana Mesa learning links and click on Pearson Easy Bridge, and that'll open up something on your side that looks like this with Savas, and Savas is now what Pearson used to be. And you will open up your textbook and you can get on the same page with me. So the first thing I wanted to point out was, you can see I've done a little highlighting here, but the first thing I wanted to point out again is just that you guys can listen to the story at your own speed. I think there are even different voices at which you can listen to the story. So you are in total control once you log onto your online textbook. For some of you guys, you need brain breaks like that to take the heavy lifting of reading a text and staying within that text and paying attention, and place that heavy lifting on someone else, allow that person to read, can be helpful to you. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to review the background, the author, and then we'll get into the description that you see partially highlighted here in the first paragraph. You'll notice that our first sentence, by the way, begins with an ing opener. The subject for that ing opener is delayed a little bit. It's this word here, I, but that's another lesson down the road. So let's just get into it and see how far we go.
Century. The Romantics explored themes of love and death.
Let's see if we can start it all the way over. There we go.
The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. Short story. Background. In this story, Edgar Allan Poe shows his sympathy for the Romantic movement, which was at its height in Europe when he was writing in the early 19th century. The Romantics explored themes of love and death, often with an intense interest in human psychology. For Poe, the darkest aspects of the mind and heart were most revealing of what it means to be human. About the author. Edgar Allan Poe, born 1809, died 1849, is regarded as the first American literary critic and the inventor of the detective story. Despite his literary success, Poe's life was almost as dark and dismal as the fiction he wrote. Shortly after his birth, his father deserted the family and his mother died. He was raised by a wealthy yet miserly merchant and lived most of his adult life in extreme poverty. Poe died at the age of 40. The circumstances of his death remain a mystery. The Fall of the House of Usher by...
Okay, it's going to say Edgar Allan Poe, but let's just take a look at the background real quick. We understand the Romantic movement to be something that is revelatory of our feelings, of our emotions. And during that Romantic period, lots of people, especially in America, wrote about the great expanse of America and its wonderful influence on their souls. Now remember that Edgar Allan Poe is a part of the dark romantics that focused on the darker psychology of the human experience. So the darkest aspects of the mind and the heart were most revealing of what it meant to be human to Edgar Allan Poe. That's important to remember. So now the author, Poe had a dark life. He had a dismal experience, as it says here. That life is reflected in the literature that he wrote. There's an old adage that says, you know, if you're going to write something, write about what you know. So when you guys do some more creative writing in this class, I want you to consider that. So perhaps Poe became such a great writer because he wrote about the experiences that he himself had. So he died at the age of 40, which, you know, I'm 5 years his senior right now. And that's a pretty young age, but think of the significance of the work he's produced and its long-lasting effect. That's a significant life that he led and a significant legacy that he's left. So he's an important person. But the circumstances of his death remain a mystery. If you wanted to look a little bit more on that, we did a little bit of a biographical sort of funny look at his life. You can look at that in modules past, or maybe I'll link it in this module for you as well. Okay, so enough with Poe. Let's get down to our story. So what you're going to notice in the first few paragraphs is that the setting is incredibly important. It's established by using particular vocabulary and interactions between the character and the setting. The main character, the narrator here, seems to be influenced heavily in his own psychology, in his own mind, by the setting. In fact, he gets spooked by a reflection, of the house that he was looking at. Just one thing to remember: a tarn is an old word for it. Well, it's a word for a lake. Remember that Gothic settings have these mysterious houses, and that's going to be described quite a bit for you here. But I also want you to just pay attention to the mood that's being described here. And if you can get there, if it's important to you, I want you to look at what's called syntax, the word order, and the way the sentences are arranged are something of sort of a master's level. So Edgar Allan Poe was known as a master of handling words and sentences. So if that's the deeper art of Edgar Allan Poe, in addition to his ability to speak in our imagination in a particular way, his handling of words in a story was something unique and really, really cool to readers during his time period. Okay, so without further ado, let's go ahead and focus in.
Edgar Allan Poe.
Son cœur est en lutte suspendu, sitôt qu'on le touche il résonne.
So first off, that's French, and the best translation that I found for this is on commonlit.org, where you can also take a look at this story if you'd like. But it is this. This means his heart is a suspended lute. Now, a lute is it's like a mini harp, kind of a stringed instrument, which resonates as soon as touched. So his heart is being compared to this musical instrument, and then something vibrates it, it resonates it, and it allows, for the instrument to be played. So what kind of song is being played here? We've spoken a lot about metaphors and things like that in class. So what we want to do is consider some of those metaphors and consider some of those other forms of art and how they might even be able to tell the story of the mood of a character. Okay, so how is his heart being played throughout these first 4 paragraphs? It's influenced by the setting. Here we go. Back to our story.
During the whole of a dull, dark, and soundless day in the autumn of the year, when the clouds hung oppressively low in the heavens, I had been passing alone on horseback through a singularly dreary tract of country.
All right, so when we pause at the first independent clause, I don't want to pause too much, but it is important to point out the description here. So during the whole of a dull, dark, and soundless day, what a difference. I guess it's not a difference, but what an attack upon the reader's imagination. So it puts us in a different mood, is what I'm trying to say. So the dull, dark, and soundless day of autumn of the year. So these words throw or thrust the reader into an experience that is somewhat psychologically negative, or there's something that is ominous about that. It's not necessarily uplifting to read that within the first 10 words of a story. The other indication that we have that this is something that is somewhat ominous or depressing is this idea of autumn. So autumn in literature represents the oncoming death. the leaves falling off trees hints at winter, where things die. So the seasons always have this literary symbolic value to them. So the autumn of the year is written there on purpose for us to get us into the proper mood, to really affect our fancy or affect our imagination. And then the description of the setting here, in true romantic fashion, the clouds are hanging oppressively low, oppressively low. Notice that ly dress up there. How they hung is very important. They didn't just hang low, but oppressively. So the mood of the reader is now being, or the mood of the narrator here is being reflected within the reader. We can feel that oppression just by reading the words and reading the descriptions. He says, I had been passing alone on horseback through a singularly dreary tract of country. All right, so we get the idea. A dreary tract of country is not something positive. And at length found myself at the shades of the evening, as shades of the evening drew on. So, I'm sorry, I think I misread that. So, and at length found myself as the shades of the evening drew on. Shades of the evening. Within view of the melancholy house of Usher, I know not how it was, but with the first glimpse of the building, a sense of insufferable gloom pervaded my spirit. So I'm going to continue without narrating or commenting on all the things that I'm highlighting, but I'm just going to show you how, on purpose, the author, Edgar Allan Poe, is creating this atmosphere, this mood for us as readers and also for the narrator. So words like insufferable, gloom, and melancholy, these dress-ups, these quality adjectives help us to get to a place in our minds where he wants to take us. Here's an explanation of what insufferable, or why it was insufferable. So I say insufferable for the feeling was unrelieved by any of that half pleasurable, because poetic sentiment with which the mind usually receives even the sternest natural images of the desolate or terrible. All right, so what does this paragraph mean? We're going to go in a different color. And it's important that when we come across, or I'm sorry, not paragraph, but group of sentence, this description here, it's trying to give the reader a clearer understanding of how the narrator feels, and really allowing us to crawl into the skin, if you will, of a character. And so there's further explanation of what insufferable means. And this poetic sentiment that he discusses, that he talks about, is this idea that when we look at structures, architectural structures, there is a feeling of awe, of like something cool about it, something redeeming about it, something magical or impressive about it. And even if it's like there's this temple on the 5 freeway that when I was in college, we used to drive by. I think it's a Mormon temple, and it was kind of like beautiful, but somehow kind of spooky to me. And it was down near San Diego. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that off the freeway, but you know, if I had been spooked by it, I was also, you know, sort of taken in by it. Like it was breathtaking, and so part of it was half pleasurable. So you see this term half pleasurable because of its sort of magnificence and its architecture and its creativity, and that would be that sense of poetic almost architecture or creation of that building. And he's saying that when he looks at this house, Usher's house, it's the name of the people who live there, there's nothing redeeming about it. It's just freaking him out. And the images are desolate and terrible. It was a horrible feeling when he looked upon it. All right. So he continues to say, I looked upon the scene before me, upon the mere house, in the simple landscape features of the domain, upon the bleak walls, upon the vacant eye-like windows, upon a few rank sedges, and upon a few white trunks of decayed trees. So we have quite a bit of description of the natural environment of the house, and it's all negative. You can see that the dress-ups, the adjectives, are helping us get to that imaginative spot. And with an utter depression of soul, which I can compare to no earthly sensation more properly than to the after dream of the reveler upon opium, the bitter lapse into everyday life, the hideous dropping off of the veil. So here's kind of a mature comparison, and we're going to highlight that one in blue as well. So here is Edgar Allan Poe, who was an opium user himself, explaining what the narrator must have felt, what this character must have felt looking at this building. And he compares it kind of strangely to this experience of being on an opiate drug, an opium hallucinogenic drug. So he's talking about when coming off of the drug, there is this sort of this coming back into the harsh reality of your everyday life. And it's almost like a dropping of a veil. A veil is like a covering, if you can think of it that way. And if you look through a veil, it's kind of, you have a blurred experience of what reality is. But if you remove the veil, you see things as they are. And he's saying that's kind of how it felt to be in the presence of this building. It kind of made him feel loopy, or like, where am I? What is going on? This is a strange experience. He would rather be somewhere else. So there was an iciness, a sinking, a sickening of the heart, an unredeemed dreariness of thought, which no goading of the imagination could torture into aught of the sublime. So aught means anything. So iciness, sinking, sickening, unredeemed, dreariness, torture. This is obvious that the diction, the word choice here, are all things that should move us into this mood. So there was nothing sublime. Sublime is a good concept for you guys to understand. There was nothing artistically redeeming or amazing about where he was. It was just dark and awful. There was nothing that sort of transcended experience that made it anything more than just dreary, awful, and terrible. So what was it? I paused to think, what was it that so unnerved me in the contemplation of the House of Usher? Why am I freaking out? It was a mystery, all insoluble. In other words, I couldn't solve it, nor could I grapple or wrestle with the shadowy fancies that crowded upon me as I pondered. There are combinations of very simple natural objects, which I have the power of thus affecting us. Still, the analysis of this power lies among considerations beyond our depth. Let's pause for a second. All right. So here, he says that he was forced to fall back. So he's trying to make sense of his emotions, his feeling. Why am I freaking out? And he says he's forced to fall back upon the unsatisfactory conclusion that while beyond doubt there are combinations of very simple natural objects which have the power of thus affecting us, still the analysis of this power lies among considerations beyond our depth. So he knows that, yes, in certain settings that can affect your mood, but I can't figure out why. Why do these places creep me out? I can't explain it. It's something that he can't get behind. And he says, it was possible, I reflected, that a mere different arrangement of the particulars of the scene, of the details of the picture, would be sufficient to modify or perhaps annihilate or kill or destroy its capacity for sorrowful impression. So maybe if I look at it from another perspective, I might get another feeling or another emotion from it. You guys might feel that way when you look at certain situations in your life. You might say, hey, let me take another look at this. This is actually something positive. Or you might look at a certain person in your life that way. You might consider something you notice about yourself in a certain way, and you try to turn it into something positive. And that's all he's trying to do. He's trying to rid himself of this negative feeling within him by changing perspective, which is actually, not a bad way to handle certain things. Switch the perspective, flip it, and try to make something positive. But as he tries to do this, check out what happens. He says, and acting upon this idea, I reined my horse to the precipitous brink of a black and lurid tarn that lay in unruffled luster by the dwelling. So what did he do? He took his horse by the lake, and he's about to do something in that environment. So here we go. And he gazed down. He gazed down. Notice the strong verb gazed. He didn't look down, right? He gazed. But with a shudder, even more thrilling than before. So the word but tells us there is a contradiction here. He wants to feel one way, but it doesn't happen. He's tried to improve his mood, but it doesn't improve. So he gazed down, but with a shudder, even more thrilling than before, upon the remodeled and inverted images of the gray sedge and the ghastly tree stems and the vacant and eye-like windows. So he shuddered even worse when he looked at this reflection. So it was pretty bad. It was pretty tough. So paragraph one is totally fraught with details that influence the mood of both the narrator and also the reader. All right. So that'll do it for paragraph one. All right, guys.